Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of Proudly Made in Africa podcast. Today, I'm so glad and honored to have a special guest with us today, Dr. David Nyaluke. He's a PMI fellow and a distinguished scholar in the African political system and governance. His research really delves into the nuances of, democracy and regime legitimacy. So it will be very interesting to hear him share his insight today. Thank you once again for joining us, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maverick. It's really a pleasure. And hopefully we will have a lovely conversation to the best interest of all the listeners
Yeah.
today and in the coming days.
Awesome. Thank you. So I think at this point it's very paramount for me to ask the question of, can you just give us an encapsulation of how you got to where you are today, what the story was, your perspectives from growing up to this point? If you can just give us, an overview of what it was like.
Thank you, Maverick. So, yeah, my story begins in Tanzania,
Right.
and my engagement in education, the love of study of democracy and the development also comes from the country. I come from a country, Tanzania, is one of the country in when it got independence in the 60s, 70s, up to 80s. Even now, the country has always been trying to redefine its development path and its destiny in the globe. So, and this was especially very, very important in the 60s, immediately after the country got independence, because that's when exactly we had to redefine who we are, just coming from colonialism. So in Tanzania, we have always had a lot of debates in terms of development, in terms of what is development for, what should it be about, and also the endeavor to really critique, to be against all those forces that were part of colonization, and also maybe some of the post-colonization attitudes and the behaviors, but also influences the country has always been critical about, particularly, as I said, in the 60s and in the 70s. So growing up, I really took interest in the works of the leaders, even the founding leaders of Tanzania, like Julius Nyerere, Rashid Kawawa, Sokoine, and other leaders, but also other leaders across Africa, Nkrumah, Senghor, Nelson Mandela, all these leaders, Kaunda of Zambia. So all of them, I was really interested as well. At the time when we got independence, also we had to mobilize against apartheid, which was already going on in South Africa. But a few other African countries were still under colonialism as well. So that influence was very, very important to me. And I have taken that interest of study through the primary, but mostly the secondary school. And when I had opportunity to go in the university in Tanzania and abroad, I kept studying on the same vein of democracy and the development. What exactly does it mean? And especially for our own countries in Tanzania and in Africa as a whole.
Interesting. And would you say that when you were studying in Tanzania, especially the university, which is more focused on the topic, right? Were the lecturers well equipped? Were they transparent enough to give you the information you needed to learn about, the values you needed to elevate your knowledge in this field?
Yeah, thank you, Malvek. Indeed, our lectures were very well equipped. And
Okay.
also, I was lucky also to go in the University of Dar es Salaam, because the University of Dar es Salaam was also in the forefront, particularly in the what was called a kind of Marxism and the studies of Marxism, the studies of socialism, because that is the path that Tanzania decided to take when we got independence. So it was more socialism, but also it was really trying to define this socialism in the sense of being an African socialism. So in Tanzania, even nationally, we adopted what was called Ujamaa, so African socialism, togetherness. So this was the philosophy of building our nation. And in the university, there was a lot of debates. Even the lecturers were really, engaging with those ideas and really critiquing whether really our government was implementing those ideas, whether the feasibility of those ideas, where are we in terms of that, and also comparing that with the global development. So yeah, so they were not only equipped, but they were also passionate about these subjects.
Interesting. Okay, so what did you study when you immediately when you traveled abroad to further your education? What was the course you had studied? What program?
What programs? Yeah. So my first study outside was in the University of Amsterdam,
Okay.
University of Amsterdam in Holland. And there, so coming from Tanzania with my first degree already, my interest there was to really learn what is out here in the Western education system. So being in Holland, I was in the field of, I'm not in the field of physical sciences, I'm in the field of social sciences. So I was really interested to see what are they teaching in sociology, what are they teaching in politics, what are they teaching in international relations. So all the subjects that I could take that were not physical science but social sciences, I was diving into to see what were they learning. If you look at my transcript for the university, it was overloaded because I was taking above what I was supposed to take every term. Every term you were supposed to take about 3 courses, and you could audit maybe 1 or 2, but I was taking 3, and I was auditing another 4 or 5 courses. So always really curious to see what are they teaching here in the Western countries. And it was interesting to learn so many things there at the University of Amsterdam.
Okay. And it also looks like or sounded like that was, you were driven by this curiosity to compare. Maybe there was something better than what was currently available in Tanzania. So what were the initial, maybe very visible issues that you could see already even while you were in Tanzania that made you feel maybe there's something better that I can educate people about and raise awareness about? So I'm just curious, what were the initial issues within the democracy and the government within Tanzania that made you get so curious?
Yes, so in terms of comparing, the first thing I saw when I arrived in Amsterdam was the relationships of people, even at the university. So if you talk about relations of people, the distance between the lecturer and the students. In Africa, where I came from, of course, we were collegial with the lecturers, but there was distance. There are professors there, so they, we really, kept distance. You couldn't have a casual coffee and tea with the lecturer. But when I came to Amsterdam, the lecturers were really easygoing, mingling and inviting you for coffee. So there was that sense of, kind of equality and respect between the people. Back in Tanzania, of course, we were also insisting on equality and respect, but also we maintained that kind of African way of especially respecting the elders.
Yes.
So you couldn't reduce the relationship, if someone is older, like your father or like your, so always we had to keep that distance. So that's what I saw there in terms of the difference. The other one, of course, when I learned more, I learned about the leaders in those countries. So parliamentary democracy is very key in most of the Western countries, including the Netherlands, and here also now in Ireland is parliamentary democracy. So the president does not have a lot of power, just as but in Africa, of course, our presidents, they have a lot of power. So that was some of the difference that I began to note. But also then I was also seeing, what were some of the things that were better in my own country, and some of the downfalls and some of the issues that were problematic in the Western countries.
Okay. So far in the Western hemisphere, in the Western space, do the colleges concern themselves about educating people about what's going on in African space, or is it solely focused on the social sciences within Europe itself? So I'm just curious, do people have any idea what's happening within the democracy or the governance of Africa in the colleges here?
Limited. There is limited knowledge because if you look in most universities, there is really a small amount that is being taught about Africa. In the Netherlands, like University of Amsterdam, they didn't have, like, say, an African institute. Say another university where I was not going, Leiden University, they had African Institute, and also another university there. They also had another kind of big African center as well. But those will be a few places, and in the university itself, there was a little limited in terms of teaching about Africa. In Africa, on the rivers, we learn a lot about Europe, not only in university, but also in primary and secondary school. We learn a lot about Europe, about US, and these other countries. But them, instead, they learn very little about our own countries. But then, to credit to them, some of the researchers, they are really good at understanding and teaching about Africa. If you come across those that are specialized in Africa, they would be very, very good. And I had the opportunity to learn under some of them in the University of Amsterdam, and also when I came here in Ireland afterwards.
Okay. So your research has shown that African democracy to a degree is complex and it's often misunderstood still, even though, yeah, to the credit you mentioned, many researchers are able to articulate the situation, but still on a global scale, often misunderstood by Western perspectives. So from your experience, what are some of the key factors that define democracy uniquely and in an African context? What really defines that democracy uniquely for Africa? And you can use Tanzania, because I know you've mentioned Tanzania in your work previously as well. But if you do have a view on a larger space, what would it be?
So thank you, Mavik, because that question was exactly the one that I had to grapple with even when I was doing my PhD research, because I was arguing that, even in the context of Africa, we see democracy. And when I put that argument forward, the answer, the immediate answer was that no, David, democracy is a Western creation. In Greece and then Europe, this is a Western creation. In Africa, that's why there's a struggle, because you are really trying to implement an idea which came from outside.
Wow.
So I said, yes, I can see that, but I said, even in the African context, we have democracy. And I would say, if you look at the Greek democracy, if you say, European democracy began with those Greek as an example of democracy, some of the Greek states there as an example. In Africa, we had similar kind of conditions. We had communities. They were governed by most of them. They were not even governed. They were governed also by some of them kings, some of them chiefs, and some of them most of them actually, they were governed with the elders, the council of elders. Yeah. But in all these African societies, there was not one who was using force. There was no leader who was using force to govern their people. So there was division of power, and also accountability of those leaders. And in most cases, most societies lived by, when there was any issue, it was people met and they discussed and they agreed what should be the course of action, led by their elders, led by their leaders. And if people had power like chiefs, kings, there was accountability. Some of that was even religious. For example, if someone was a leader, a chief, and for a consecutive time there was no rain, people began to hold him accountable, because he was supposed to be in a good relationship with God, and with that good relationship, then the country will also benefit. So if there was problems, he was also accountable in that way with the council of elders, but always there was meetings. There was this example where African people always used to meet under the tree. They discuss, they agree, and they live their lives happily after that.
Yeah.
So that has been the mode of democracy in Africa. And I said the same if you look at Greek, that was the mode of democracy there. They had debates, they had the city council. You could join a council and be part of that, be voted to be in the council. In Africa, we really prioritize elders, not because they can be good dictators, but because we value that, these people, they know better than the younger ones because of experience. They've been through that experience. They are also wise because of that experience. So that is the reason why we gave the elders the benefit of doubt, because they have been there before, they know, and they were supposed to act wisely. If they gave a counsel which is not wise, then that was questioned, not only by young people, but also by other elders as well. So wisdom and all that was the main thing, but also discussion was the main thing there. So that is my argument for saying in Africa, we also, from our communities, we also had the democracy. The next thing was that we also were anti large inequalities. So there was equality, common ownership of land, of property. Most of the property of the country was also co-owned by everybody in the society, to ensure that everybody has a welfare, they live well, and if there's any problems, there was support from other people, but also maybe other people would counsel or help. So that way, we maintained our main ways of life, and the democracy as well in terms of governance. When anything happened, we sit together, we discuss, we agree, and then we move forward. So that was the kind of form of democracy that we had. And in the modern times, we then began to shift towards different forms of democracy, because now we were in the modern society, particularly after colonialism, because we had colonialism, which destroyed our former ways of organizing. Then they put in new systems. And when we began with this system, that's when we began to encounter problems. And in most of the African countries at the beginning, we shifted towards the one-party state. Because in Europe, they have this multi-party system, but in Africa, we prefer to shift towards the one-party state. So even when I put the argument that, so one-party state was the way, and this one-party state, they were still democratic. So again, the argument there was that, no, David, you cannot have democracy under what is only one party. But I had to put the argument that, it's possible to have democracy under the one party. And I showed how, particularly using the case of Tanzania itself, the way it instituted the one-party state and the way they ran the one-party state. And also the reason why we shifted to one-party state, because we shifted to one-party state, we were arguing that previously to before colonialism, we didn't have parties. We were one community governed by agreement with the elders. So there was no parties. And
was it democracy?
And it was still democratic.
Yeah.
And something that is similar to what we had in the past is the one-party state, is not the multi-party state that you guys from the West want to impose on us. So that was the kind of argument I was making in these discussions.
So what was the standout difference in terms of how leaders were selected before the Western influence came? If we had just one party state, and I'm pretty sure the council were very influential in choosing the leader, but what was the standout criteria that made it justified? Was it because it wasn't like anarchy where we had maybe a situation of royalty? So what was the standout situation there?
So the standard situation was that in most smaller communities you had elders. So it was, everybody was equal, and when it came to issues of community, there was those elders that were trusted to be wise. So those then would meet maybe from several families. They had really established themselves as wise people, and they would contribute their ideas towards that. It's the same thing that was, if you see in the African family, because in Africa we tend to have extended family.
Yeah.
So when you have extended family, a problem happened, you all come together, and then you will have meeting, you talk slowly, you discuss, and then you also respect the elders. You listen to the elders, what they're going to guide because of experience, and that's the way you will resolve the issue that will happen. The same with the bigger community. With the issue happening, the people knew that, there we will have that gentleman and that gentleman and that gentleman, and they will meet and they will give us the counsel for moving forward. But then when you have kings, so those chiefs, the chiefs were actually, when the chiefs came, most of them, they didn't come from conquering people, from being war soldiers, etc. Most of them came, the smaller chiefs, they came from being chosen to be the wise people to make decisions.
Like
That's why
representatives.
in my own language, the name of the chief, we say Mtemi. So Mtemi is like the cutter, the one who cuts. So the one who cuts is that when you have a dispute, you bring it to him or her, and she will cut, she will make the decision. Yeah, so that was the role of the chief. It wasn't to really give orders to people, do this, do that. It was to really make decisions that, mattered when people had dispute. And those people became the chief. And then, of course, later on, they had to develop also the people to guard the community. And that's when you had some of the soldiers, that were part of guarding the community, like that. But it wasn't like anybody just comes in and becomes a chief. And then when others became kings, the same. They had also, say, for example, if you take, say, the kingdom I know, for example, let's take the kingdom of Buganda in Uganda. Very well organized kingdom. They had a king, but under the king, there was also the council of elders, and there was even the council of ministers all these were advisory to the king, to advise the king, to make him implement some of the decision. The mother of the king was also a very, very important person in terms of, the king had to listen to his mother as well. But also there was council of elders, and there was even the prime minister, Katikilo, the prime minister, and the council of elders to govern the country. All of that was done not by force, by discussion and agreements, so that, always there is harmony within the community and the country, because that is the role of governance, to have harmony in the community, and that way we brought harmony in our own communities. And that's what we wanted to do with the one-party state, to continue bringing harmony in our own community. Because when you have this multi-party state, as you can see, it can be very chaotic when they're fighting for power.
Under the name of democracy.
The name of democracy.
Yes. It does seem like the reason why the British, I would say many would argue that the British system of democracy has highly influenced the global stage. And it's because, but many will still argue that the system was designed to allow them colonize a lot of places, even though they are just a small land, right? Because they divide people and then they take control over them. So one thing I was going to say, there's an argument to wonder why the African society really crumbled and allowed this penetration, allowed them to lose sight of their own administration, which was efficient. But on one hand, because I can compare that to Yoruba land, which I knew about, it's very similar. There was an accountability system. There was an accountability to the accountability system to make sure those people still were in check. And it seemed to work because regardless of if there were personal issues, the problem wasn't about people. It was what was the issue on ground that we need to fix. And that was working. Now, my question is, in some regards, we still respect our elders in Africa, because if you look at most of the leaders, they're still older people. What has really, is it solely because Africans are trying to adopt the Western way of democracy? Is that the main reason why our governance is still terrible today? What are the real reasons why the elders are not as accountable today and they seem to be power driven?
So so a lot has happened. There. I will come to there to say, why the elders and why things are falling apart. But one thing I need to emphasize, especially to allude to the point you said about the British, and also that, maybe they were forcing these systems into other countries as a system of divide and rule. So what I want to say is that, of course, these guys are not genius or whatever. All of us, we are guided by our experience, our history. So the history of democracy in Europe, it began simple, as they say in Greek and everywhere, simple like that.
Yeah.
But then later on, it came to a stage where they had to have this kind of parliamentary democracy and a multi-party systems. But this developed organically in their own countries. And in their own countries, that still keeps the harmony of their countries, because they have developed with the history of the country, with the culture of the country over time. Yes. Now in Africa, we were disrupted. So we had our own and we were disrupted. And when we moved to one-party state, it worked successfully in some countries. In some countries, it did not work successfully. And later on, so that was 60s, 70s, many countries went into one-party state. But then we had to come back to the multi-party state, because now these people, even from outside, they argued that, you tried one-party state, it did not work. So now adapt the multi-party state. So that's why we went to the multi-party state. But now, why this governance, as you were saying, Maverick, why does it not work in Africa now? Why? Is there anything wrong with the elders? Why the elders are not accountable? So that is the issue that we need to address. And to address this issue, my hypothesis, my theory, is that if we look at the African leaders, even when we went to one-party state, even when we went to one-party state, there is leaders who tried to rule their country in a way that they were accountable, and in the way of the African leader, that he's there for the good of the community. He's not there for the good of himself and his family only, and his friends only, or his tribe only. They took that, those leaders who took that idea of the African leader, that you are an African leader, you are leading for the benefit of the country and the community. You are the wise person, and you have also the benefit of advice from others, listening to others, because that was the currents of leadership, of the African leadership. So those leaders really did their work very well in their own countries. You look at countries like Tanzania is a good example. Julius Nyerere, a very, very good example of how democracy worked there in the country. I proved that in my thesis that, even against the argument from my supervisors and the professors that, there might not be democracy in Africa, and maybe in a one-party state is impossible. But I proved the argument that if we look the way this one-party operated, we can argue that, there was democracy here. And they agreed with me that, there was democracy there. So some of the leaders tried. If you go to Kaunda of Zambia, one-party state as well, it went good. It went good in the governance of the country. If you go to Mozambique, they tried one-party state there. It went well, But there was cases where the leaders became opposite, even to the values of the key values of the African leader, and that's where we got problems, because we got problems. We got problems there. Those one-party states there did not work, and also then even when we shifted to the multi-party state, you can see that there was struggle, and this struggle is because Maverick is not because we have one-party state or single-party state. Is because the leaders that are there, they are really not being accountable, using the African values, but also using the modern values of the multi-party that is supposed to be in place. So these guys, somehow they've gone beyond any control. They are not controlled by the modern multi-party, Western multi-party system. They are also not controlled by the African key values of leaders. Yeah. So the problem is not even multi-party or single party. The problem is that actually these leaders are not wanting to be accountable either with the key African values of leaders or with the values of the current multi-party and even the constitutions of their own countries. Very, very good constitution of their own countries. They don't like to be accountable using those prescriptions and the values. So that is, I think, that is the main problem there with governance in Africa. It's not about the system; it's more about these leaders and how they want to be unaccountable using any value system, even our own African value system.
They are stuck in between. They are not choosing a side. But the question now seems like there is a system which seems to be designed well, right? But the individual who has been plugged into this system is corrupt, poisoned. And my question is, over time, how have we been able to accept such standards where an individual who somehow gains power, gains the trust of the people, and gains this position, is not held accountable by the system? So shouldn't we have evolved to a stage where the system ensures that if someone comes in as a bad apple, he's quickly identified and the people can see the true nature and he's rendered maybe powerless? I feel the system should be more powerful than the individuals, quote unquote, what I'm trying to ask. So how is it possible that an individual comes in and he overshadows the efficiency of the system? Doesn't that in a way mean the system is not efficient?
Yes, Maverick. Very, 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 very good question, Maverick. So systems, Maverick, they are built, and they are built over time, and they have the history as well. Yeah. So the same if you look at Western democracies, how they began. When they began, of course, just like us, we began small communities, some leader there, some leader there. And then later we had these complex systems that we have, later. Even in Europe, they had that. Now, there was kings, that arose. And these people began to abuse power. How this multi-party system evolved in Europe. Those kings began to abuse power. People rose. They said, no, we are not accepting this at some point. We are not accepting this because this is not the way we want to be governed. So as you might have there was revolutions across Europe.
Yes.
In Britain, in France, everywhere there was revolutions of people wanting democracy. In some places they said we don't even want a king at all. That's why France, for example, we don't have kings in France because they killed their king and they said we don't want to have a king at all. We want to have leaders there that will be accountable to the people with the constitution, with the court, with the parliament. And that's how they maintained that. And always people remember that, we don't like to go back to the days of the king. Britain the same, but of course they spared the king. They spared the king, but they reduced his or her power very much. So he's almost like just somebody like head of state, but very, very little powers. So this is how they developed that system. And over time, that system continued to consolidate. And it goes on. Sometimes it faces problems, but it goes on like that. Now in Africa, we didn't have long. We had our cultures. Then they were disrupted by almost like 100 years of colonialism. They were disrupted, and then when we got independence, we began to build these systems afresh. And the thing is that when we were fighting for independence, those leaders were very powerful people. And some of them were not from the traditional African leaders. They were just young people who were educated and they became leaders of their own country. Now, how these people tried to build democracy in the country influenced how that system was built in a particular country. It influenced a lot. And also, from the very beginning, people have always been complaining in Africa. If something was going wrong, they've been complaining. And if there was opportunity, they were able to remove those leaders, either by revolution or by voting them out. But always there was always an element of people saying, this is not right. This is not right. So, and I think we are continuing on. So, we went up with one party state up to 1980s, and the people said, this is not good. Many of you are dictators. Many of you are really bad dictators. We need to change this. And the people that were fighting to bring multi-party were not only outsiders. It was Africans as well saying, we need to be governed better. So we got multi-party now in our own countries. And so the struggle continues to see if we can tie to these people. We can tie to these people and make them accountable. Now you can see various movements. There was the young people in Kenya who really gave their president a very hard time, very hard time last 6 months.
Yeah.
Very hard time. So these are young people, Gen Z, Generation Z, Gen Z. They gave their president a very hard time. Until today, they are still trying to see what really happened, because they really did not expect this to come from the African young people. In Nigeria, in Ghana, even the multi-party system, you can see is evolving and is becoming better. Maybe in some countries like Ghana, they have changed the presidents over time. Go to other places. Botswana, even recently, they had, they've changed from, a party that ruled the country for 60 years. Now another party has come in power. So that struggle continues. The people in Africa, we are always, demanding for better governance. And I think one day, this will come together. It will come together.
Yeah, and that's true, because you mentioned Kenya, which they were protesting heavily recently, and as a result, many young Gen Zs lost their lives. And obviously, in other societies, that would cause a huge rise for need for accountability, where even the president can go to, can be charged or sued. But that doesn't seem to be the case in Africa. It happened in Nigeria as well with the NSAS protest. But the question is it just the leaders that are, because it doesn't seem to be just, it seems to be a system of corruption as well, where the corruption has simmed down. And even if a leader comes in with good intentions, he quickly realizes the power against him. It's more like the risk of being good outweighs the risk of being bad in the system. If you choose to steal from your country, you can actually escape any risk. But if you choose to be good, there's the risk of being killed, assassinated, or worse. So the question is, are we hopeless in this situation? Because we might say there is a future that is bright tomorrow, but if we don't have any way as modernized men, Africa are blessed with smart people, but if we don't have any forecast, any timeline that we can say we foresee ourselves, get into this level of growth in our economic system, then I feel like we're just being hopeful. And yes, you are truthful in saying it will happen because it's inevitable. The people would grow and old. But do we have any signs, any actual signs that show as an example in other places? Like you've mentioned Tanzania, but I'm just curious if there are more signs where we see legitimate regimes happening.
So, and I think for Africa, of course, Africa is big, and some of the good examples, they really don't show a lot of, they don't shine quite a lot. So I mentioned Botswana there. They have been doing very well as a democratic country. Even when they were governed over time with a one-party state, they have been, it has been still good governance. And then now they changed the president from the one to the other, and also, very, very good example there. Mozambique, again, they came from civil war. Over time, they have really good system of governance there. The democracy is working with change of government, but also accountable leadership. Namibia, another young country, they got independence from South Africa, not so long ago, but they've shown good example of of democracy. You go to countries like Mauritius, they are not only democrats, but also economically they are doing very well. I would say Kenya itself, despite the problem, they've also shown an example. They have a very strong constitution there, which has been built over time. And even you are saying that the president is still survived, but I tell you, Maverick, they gave this guy hard time, and I think there's still, this is still reverberating. This thing that the GNZ in Kenya did is still reverberating across East Africa. It's still reverberating across East Africa. There is other examples of good leadership in Rwanda, for example, coming from genocide, trying to build the country and stabilize it. Good leadership there. In Rwanda, Senegal, now there is a young person who has come in power. Another good example there. Ghana also, I think they've been changing leadership there. And also you can see the sentiment of those young people who made the revolutions in Western Africa. If you take Burkina Faso, the new young person who has taken the sentiment of him and what he wants to do in the country is quite good. If I revert back to the example of Tanzania again, also I would say the issue there is that in Africa, as I said, the presidents have been very powerful. So and I think because they control the system, they control unlike in other parts of the world, when someone becomes a president, they control the police, they control almost everything.
Yes.
So, and the people have been crying for those powers to be kind of dissected and spaced. But I think that has been the main issue why we are struggling. And when once you get a good president, the scope for change is very quick in many of the African countries. And I think it will begin with that somehow. But also I think that our people are also changing, because when the culture in the country is changing, when a lot of people are saying, no, we cannot put up with this, we cannot put up with this, it becomes difficult for the country or for the leaders to continue doing, to do things that are not going with the will of the people. And I think that mass of people in Africa is growing. And
well, when you look at the African culture, like we've established earlier, the accountability system, the culture is respect your elders. And in the past, it's those elders that hold each other accountable. So we, the young ones, look up to the elders, right? Why is it that today it's actually the young ones that seem to have the right mindset in trying to do just for these countries? And why is it that the elders, the parents of these young ones that are going to protest and getting killed are not taking actions, generally speaking, on a massive scale in these African countries?
I would say, always there was always, say, even with the elders, there was always a division between those that were complicit to corruption and those that were opposed to corruption. So I would say, even looking at the history of my country, always there was those elements that were, wanting for good governance. They were fighting for good governance always. But I think now, Maverick, is time of change of generations. Is the time of change of the generations. In fact, now we are that threshold where we are really changing generations. We are really changing generations. Really, the new ones are supposed to come in, and the old ones are supposed to go out. So maybe maybe it was like maybe 80s, 90s was kind of a 90s kind of transition between the old and the new. But I think the more we are heading in the 21st century, it's becoming apparent that we need a generational change, because even the demographic in Africa is really turning around, where younger people are becoming the majority of the population and the older people are becoming the minority of the population.
Yeah.
And I think that's a time where we need to be experiencing change. And I think we see even here in Europe, most of the leaders are really young people.
Yes.
Young people from France, You go to UK there, some of the young people are there, but you come to Ireland here, two conservative young prime
Yeah.
ministers, West Finland. So I think globally also is kind of the time of
Shifting.
change of the generation. And if you see older men governing, it looks like, wow, it's a bit odd. Is a bit odd. And I think, slowly the same kind of dynamic is happening. Not only slowly, but in Africa, I think it will be more apparent because, as I said, the population is really turning around. The young people are becoming majority and the older people are becoming a minority.
Okay. But you make a very good point in terms of African administration was disrupted compared to the organic evolution of the Western one. And one very strong issue that we still face, I think, is also a source of the exploitation that we are still suffering from in Africa is our administration was based on communities, like you mentioned. The accountability was based on communities. So it was easy to solve issues where this community has an issue, but we're solving it for our people. Today, the way the administration has evolved, a lot of communities have come together, which means a
Yes.
lot of tribes have been put under one umbrella. But still, the leaders seem to be very much tied into their own tribe. They seem
Yeah.
to be wanting to do it for their tribe, or even if that's not what it seems like, other tribes feel like he is not having their best interests. So I've
Yes.
seen this tribal war happen so much in Africa, not just in Nigeria, but growing up in Nigeria, I felt that very strongly up till today. So what would you advise, or what would be the theory, hypothesis of how we can overcome that?
Very good question there, Maverick. And I would say, even when I was writing my thesis, I said the independence of Africa, when we were fighting for independence, the key promises was that independence was going to bring us democracy. Independence was going to bring us unity, and independence was going to bring us prosperity. And it was going to bring not us as a whole. So if the Nigerians as a whole were fighting for independence, that was a promise that it will bring prosperity to all of us. Unity,
Yes.
because actually we were arguing that when we were colonized because we were disunited. When these
Yeah.
guys came, they went to Igbo, they went to Yoruba separately, and then that's where they were able to conquer us because we were divided already, and they
Yes.
used that line to divide us. So now we want to bring independence. We want to be united, and the independence will bring us more united country, and we'll be together there. So really, what's happening is that there is problems when the leaders don't really understand this. That when you are the leader of Nigeria, you are the leader of all Nigerians, and you should bring those values of accountability that you had in your community, bring them at the national level. If you don't bring that at the national level, this is not Nigeria. It will be Igbo land or Yoruba land or Hausa land. It won't be
Yes.
Nigeria. If you want to govern Nigeria, you have to have the interests of all Nigeria at heart. And often we say, now we say in development, we say those most behind first. So you should even take care of those who are really left behind in development and
Yes.
space development everywhere, and bring everybody on board. It should be reflective of everybody in board. And you can see, Maverick, you can see the leaders who successfully governed their countries in Africa. You can see how they were really, working hard to make sure that they bring everybody on board in their appointments, in their development plans. They were really trying to see the country as a whole. And they brought everybody along. But when they miss that picture, that's when we get problems. And I think this is a is a stupid mistake that an African leader can make when
Yes.
you are in your African country, which is multicultural, multi-ethnic. You have to bring that equation together in your mind.
Okay, so in terms of, I think one of PMI's mission is to highlight trade justice as a pathway to a more equitable Africa. So, from your own perspective, what are some of the biggest obstacles currently preventing African countries from realizing fair trade and that equitable economic systems?
There's two elements there, Maverick. So one is Africa and the outside, and the one is Africa within itself.
Mm.
So Africa and the outside is that we have failed to change the colonial system, because the colonial system was that these guys came, they were after our raw materials. Take raw materials, bring it to Europe, make goods, consume those goods, benefit from them, and if somebody, if possible, come back and sell made products in Europe, in Africa, and get more profit, you know, without any accountability. So when we got independence, really, we haven't worked hard to change that system, to say, okay, guys, no, we will stop this. You will not get the raw material from us. We will keep our raw material. We will produce our own products, and we can sell the products to you. Just like you, if you have any raw material, we buy products from you. You will buy
Yes.
products made from us. So we failed to change that system, and that's why we have problems until today. So that is with the outside. Internally also, we have a big market. We have a big market, but we have failed to create a common market of Africa. In Europe, as you can see, they created a common market of Europe. So now in Africa, we have made some advances. We have moved towards African Union.
Yeah.
We have now created something called the African Free Trade Area. So this is really a step towards forming a common market. But I think the other thing that we've done well, we have done well in creating the regional markets like ECOWAS, East African Community, SADC, Southern African Community. There is some in the east like COMESA, and some in the north as well. So very, very strong regional organization. And now we are trying to pull them together into a common market. So that way, that's the only way we can solve our economic and the market problems. Bring our market together, guard our market, and sell things within ourselves. We benefit, and also we benefit more and more and more from that kind of relationship. And all these things now, these things are coming now, Maverick, because of the fact that over time we have been learning. We have been learning about this unity, about how we are being exploited. So slowly we are becoming together to consolidate our markets there in Africa.
That's good, because many will still argue that Africa is not Africa on its own, but after colonization or independence, Africa is quite young. African countries are quite young compared to maybe what's happened in America over 300 years of civilization. Yes. So yes, we can actually send some accolades down to Africa. I think some will argue that technology has also helped this journey, because more awareness. Yes. But I'm curious, because the free trade area that you mentioned is a bold initiative, which we should have come earlier, but we're glad it's here, and it's here to boost intra-Africa trade. But how do you see this influencing local economies, and the political landscape? Because in reality, in Africa, we still have a very huge gap between the rich and the extremely poor.
So it's good between countries to countries, because immediately say we won't need a dollar to trade. So we won't need external money to trade. And also our borders, cross-border, the borders between countries and countries, they're also close by. So cross-border trade, very, 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 very big and very, very good. So that will really bring a lot of dynamic there. As I said, the market is big. The market in Africa is big. If you have there is even now people who are making cars. Say in Nigeria, I hear there's a Inosom, for example. Inosom is a company that makes cars in Nigeria. There's another car manufacturer in Ghana. They're making cars there in Ghana. So imagine all these guys getting the market of their cars in Africa, because even in the Africa Free Continental Free Trade Area, if you are selling something that has like 90% African content, you don't get taxation.
So that encourages it.
Yeah, in another country. So so if and the market is big.
Yes, very big.
So this is going to really be beneficial, and also complementarity. There is varied African strength in various countries, different productions in various countries. So we really stand to benefit because we have varied economies which can really complement and benefit from each other.
Interesting.
And the formula of doing these things now, you have the European market template, very good template. You can even develop other new ways that are even better, but definitely, is no brainer now for other countries, especially Africa, to really form our unity and benefit from it with some of the political element. But I think once they open up and the people begin to move, free trade, free movement of goods, free movement of people, it will just increase and consolidate itself, and then it will begin to bring dynamics of people putting more pressure for reforms that are needed to make things even better.
I think similar to what has happened in Nigeria, where for so many years, even though Nigeria has crude oil, they never were able to build a refinery. Not until recently, Dangote has now successfully done that. And also, I think there's an agreement where they would trade in naira, not in dollars. So that would help the naira fight against the dollar rate. Now, that's a good milestone, definitely. My question is, are there any potential challenges that African government need to be cautious of regarding this initiative? Because the reality is, I don't think the external forces will be happy about this development in Africa, regardless of how quiet they may seem. This is still a competition to their power and the dependency of African nations on their own trade.
Yes, Maverick. I mean, they can try to disrupt it in various ways because definitely they've been benefiting from Africa, but the way it's happening in Africa, the way it's happening in kind of large scale, and also the way is people led. So it's not even led by government. It's mostly some of this dynamic will really benefit the people. So I think over time it will tend to benefit because it's not like one country idea, is a whole country idea. Even they say some people are saying Gaddafi was really instrumental in putting forward some of these ideas.
Yes.
And maybe some people have a theory that he was killed because of that.
Yeah.
But now all the African countries are coming together. So who do you kill? Who do you kill? Who do you kill? So the same will be like the way Europe began, and now they had to accept that. The same will be in Africa. We just begin, and this is the way we will do. This is the way we will do business. People like Dangote, they've begun that big factory there. Is that could be grown or anything like that, but he's he has been in business for a long time. He's experienced, and now he has support of his government, and not only his government. Other countries are saying, we will buy your oil, Dangote. We need the oil from Africa, made in Africa. So as you can see now, the market there for Dangote, when he begins. So and he has shown the example. So that will be the first one. But then I'm sure there is a number of them in the pipeline coming up as well in other countries.
That's a very good point. I think I was speaking to someone earlier that mentioned one important factor actually is we need more people to lead the ways, no matter how challenging it seems. But if we start to have those people really leading the way, others are inspired to make efforts. So yeah,
absolutely.
It's definitely looking up then in that case. Would you say, in terms of policy reforms, though, because you do have a strong background in both social policy and development. So if we're talking of priority, because we could really look at the landscape of policy changes and we'll be overwhelmed, especially without real resources of expertise. So if we're to really prioritize like a policy change to support that sustainable development, and fair governance in Africa, what would the policy focus on?
I would say So we are in the new era in Africa. The previous era, Malvik, was government doing things. So most of the things were done by the government in the previous era when we got independence, 60s, 70s. But now the shift has shifted towards people, the private sector.
Okay.
Yeah, private sector. So I think even if we have problems with democracy, etc., but if they create more policies that enables the private sector to grow, the entrepreneurship of people to thrive, the movement of people to go on, that will eventually really change Africa in a big way. So I would say, we need to really continue pushing for these changes that enable the private sector and the people movement, entrepreneurship to thrive. The process that enable the people to do business, and then we can have other policies in the democratic sphere, in the social sphere. I would say the other thing would be good to invest in education. These are really multiplier effect. As we said, technology has really helped us because you are right in pointing that the technology has really helped us, especially digital technology has really helped us because it enables for freedom to get more information, to get more movement. So that has been really useful. So I think investment in this kind of technology that can enable people to get information, use the information, that would be also a key element there. Education in general to really uplift our education systems, enable every young person to get a good education. That will be also key. And then of course we continue fighting for democracy and the governance there, and some of those pieces, they will come together. They will come together as well.
And there is this arguments I've often heard of. A lot of Africans are abroad. Making certain trends in different countries, and of course, this is almost like, how would I say it? But the countries that they are setting these trends in claim the benefits. Enjoy the benefit of it. So we were talking of in sports, in whatever, we have Black Americans who originally are Africans and everything.
Yes,
But the question is, some argue that for Africa to really evolve, develop as fast, as rapid as it can, we need more of the leaders, more of these trendsetters across and abroad to come home, or at least focus on really investing home. Would you support that argument, or do you have an opposing side to that?
Yes, so I would support that argument. I would support that argument. And I think what happens there, Mavericks, that it happens naturally. When people are here, they are doing good, And also, I think the other thing is that in most of these areas, there is really limited spaces to invest. Or investing, the threshold is very high. So I would say most of the people, they really invest back in their home country, especially the first generation of Africans, but maybe the more younger people, they can, because they don't know Africa quite a lot. So they need to be, led, guided. But I think the first generation is Africans. The next thing they get extra money is to try to see how they can invest back at home. And so far, they've really helped. They've really helped the continent in terms of various, especially remittances that are sent there, which go to support people in Africa in various sectors. So all that is really good. But I would say now, given, as we said, technology, even Africa does not really need a lot of people it does not need a lot of things from outside. There is a lot of dynamic within Africa because previous, I think the big issue was there that the people they did not have access to technology, new ideas. But now with the freedom of information from Africa and outside Africa, even people in Africa now, itself within the African, there is a lot of dynamic there without the outside. But the link with the outside is even making things even better.
Okay, that's good. And now there's this part about the international community, countries, providing that support to Africa. So we're talking of aids. We see it everywhere. Aid for this community, aid for this group. But I've also seen that most of this aid could be passing in the billions, right? Or hundreds of millions. and they gain the ability or the opportunity or benefits to say of looking like these philanthropic countries really helping African countries. Under the radar, though, the benefits that they are gaining from these African countries far exceeds the aid they're providing, but we don't see that. So my question is, I've always asked this question: why is it that this aid? Because I had a country had given aid to, I think Ireland had given aid to an African country for over 40, 50 years, and there was no trade between this country. So it was
Yeah.
strictly aid, but they were still buying raw commodities, raw materials, and processing it in Europe. So where has this aid been going towards? Why is it that this is still the strategy that is happening till today? And should African countries look into a different manner of, sustaining themselves in terms of preventing, this imbalance or over dependency? Because many argue the reason why these aids are coming is to make sure they are still dependent on them. So what can we do about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think that is that's the thing there. That's the thing that is aid is kind of continuation of colonialism in a way, because when you give aid, you are kind of superior, and you are helping these people that need help, that are helpless. So is a way of to colonize the countries. As you said there, Maverick, we are becoming aware more and more that, first of all, aid does not work, and also we are becoming aware more and more that aid is pittance compared to the exploitation that is happening through these countries taking our raw materials and just using them for creating goods outside of Africa. So definitely the concept of aid is really to continue kind of colonialism, and as we are all realizing that this is useless, I think it will call for change of these policies. But also internally, African countries, the way the private sector is developing and the way the countries are developing, aid is becoming a little bit irrelevant. Is becoming a little bit outdated and a little bit irrelevant, because the countries are developing even faster. Those who are leading on the trajectory of developing, they're developing even faster. But also, I think the private sector, the way it is developing Africa, is really showing that development is happening in these countries by the effort of own people, and not this pittance that is being sent by European countries to Africa, which most often there is no accountability. People don't know exactly where does this money go in terms of helping development in those countries. So again, the more we look at this, is some of those things that becomes irrelevant and a bit awkward as well. The more they continue drumming drums about them.
The reason why I'm curious about the aid process as well is the fact that we hear hundreds of millions of dollars flowing in, and I don't know if you know more about this, but is it the government that can regulate it? We're not talking of stopping the aid, but channeling the aid into a more useful process. So, for example, we have countries that process tea, coffee, and the like, but they have a huge problem or challenge in terms of exportation because they don't have the processing ability. They can't compete with the big boys, as they say. So I've always asked myself, why is this aid coming in to certain channels and not going into those companies, startups, where you can help them complete their supply chain, their value chain, so that they now have the ability to export or gain leverage in the exportation process. So is this something that the government need to set policies in, or is it just agreement between corporations, or bodies? Is it the bodies, the activist bodies, that will help regulate these channels for aids to be properly used?
So as I said, Maverick, aid always was tied in with the colonialism, and so that's why it doesn't have a different thinking. It doesn't have an anti-colonial thinking, because aid, was kind of to continue the kind of colonialism there. that was there to continue, building on the same system, because the system was that Africa would produce raw material, bring it to us, we benefit from that. So when they send aid, they don't send aid to make Africa produce the products and send the products here in their own countries.
Yeah.
So aid continues there to say, okay, we are helping you with the maybe education, we are helping you maybe with the gender equality, and also these aid also come with dictation. They choose areas where they want it to go, but also then when it is there, also the government in our countries will have their own priorities, and when they have their own priorities, unfortunately for most of the government, really we haven't been doing the anti-colonial policies. So then that money will not go into the anti-colonial policies. It will, maybe some of it will end up in people's pockets, or some of it will go in traditional colonial sectors, that are not changing the international system.
Wow.
Yes,
so
yes.
maybe along with the rapid evolution happening in Africa, we need to put a more focus and priority on reversing the colonial roots and systems that we have in Africa, because they are still present, even though we are fighting against them.
Definitely. This is why the topic of decolonizing is very big and is very pertinent in these areas. There is a lot of things that we need to decolonize. Even here in Ireland, even in Africa, individually, there is a lot of things that we need to decolonize. This decolonialism was a very, very dominant force, and it still continues in different ways. So decolonizing is an agenda that we should have individually, but also as countries, both in Africa and here in Europe, because this has been a very dominant system.
Well, when we actually bring Europe to the play, I think I wanted to argue this. So in Europe, in Ireland, colonized by Britain, they didn't really have any efficient administration because they just found their own independence. But it seemed like the participation, their membership within the EU, and the pleasant landscape that the government helped the American companies to come and invest in Ireland really helped Ireland's development to evolve rapidly, because Ireland has developed quite rapidly.
Yes.
But also I've heard that they learned a lot, especially from the way the American companies ran their companies. They also learned a lot from the way other countries within the EU, or the policies, the system that has been designed, that are already proven systems within the EU, were just kind of like given to them as templates to utilize. So even though they had corrupt leaders in the past, today they have quite an efficient administration, and this is heavily due to their membership in the EU. Now, some will argue that it's not just the corruption in Africa that is a problem, but the lack of expertise, seeing an efficient way of doing it. Would you be able to shed any light on that? Is there a need for African countries to join a more, robust association, something similar to what we have in the EU? And does that mean that the current ones we have are not as efficient or quite robust?
Countries need to have strategy for development, and I think all of the countries do have strategies for development. Ireland, you go in a country, they have strategy for development.
Yes.
And also the countries learn from each other. Even say China in their development recently, they've learned a lot from other countries. From other countries. And I would say the same would apply to African countries. We have always been having the problem of development, and so we have to, in development, you have to learn from yourself, but also you have to learn from others. So and those learnings have been there. They've been there. Countries have been learning. The only thing is whether you have set up a strategy, and you have set up the processes of really implementing what you are learning and moving your development forward, investing in areas where you are supposed to invest. So, and I think, if you look at countries, you can see really intentional investment, say in research, in advancing their education systems, in updating their, the way they do things, the way areas where they can attract investment, areas where they can develop certain industries. So they are really intentional policies. So I would say maybe in Africa, one thing that we might be lacking is that kind of intentional and a really strong focus and a passion to really develop and move our countries faster in terms of development. And
Okay.
and as you can see, in terms of that, when we got independence, there was a big drive towards really learning and developing our countries. At some point, we went and kind of lost it. But I think one of the issues at the beginning was also manpower, technology. Technology was not available easily.
Yes.
Back in the past. But now with the internet, technology is easily available, and any ideas that you want to do things are easily available. So now I think the key thing that might be lacking is the will and the leadership towards, bringing a lot of development fast.
Oh, engineering has also been a very big fit. Like you say, technology is a form of technology. I would say it's an underlying form of technology. Now, my question is, because even though we praise the European way of life, the American, the Western way,
Yes.
we still know that it's not perfect. We still know that the world is not fair. And
Yes.
there's a lot of things that people will say, is it right or wrong these days, or it's about powerful versus powerless? My question is, what do you think about the role technology can really help and play in administration of a society in the future in terms of accountability? Today, we don't have this form of generalized accountability where voting system, first of all, is really transparent because the systems are still very dependent. They can still be manipulated to a certain degree.
Yes.
You can hear voting, but it's not really accurate. It's not trustworthy. We have policies, we have fiscal budget and stuff, the allocation of money, the withdrawal of money. Why are we still hearing that someone is able to siphon 2 billion naira in his pocket? If there are systems the way we have in companies that the budgeting system is automated, approval systems is going through different signatures, and there is a board that can be held accountable to providing those proof when needed, shouldn't that like I'm just curious, what do you see the role of engineering or technology really playing in the future of administration?
The technology will really help us to enhance our administration, to make services faster, to make services availability easier, and I can already see that. I can already see the way, for example, even in Tanzania, as a Tanzanian now, I could apply my passport online and send documents and everything, and in a few days I have that process finished without movement, without anything. The role of payment system, for example, has really helped. Money is just moving. You pay with the phone, it goes there. They can easily account how much has been received, etc. So technology has been really supporting it can support our development very, very quickly. But I would say still also technology goes also with the way people want it to be used.
Yes.
So if even within the system, if the people are not trustworthy, they can still manipulate the system. Even say the voting, even if we make it electronic. There was a case of Kenya there where there was even indication that some of the candidates brought in really specialized hackers of system. So again, so it's really also about the culture of the society and the way they want to use the system. Even in America there, despite the development, there was a case where Mr. Trump was asking this electoral civil servant that, hey,
Yeah.
can I get just 6,000 votes? They are added to
Mm.
that to that chart. So
Wow.
that, yes. So again, so technology is all about also we as a society, how we want to use it, how we want to make ourselves accountable, etc. So I think that's also a big piece there for us to deal with. As I said, now technology is available, but in Africa we are not moving fast.
Mm.
What are we lacking? We are lacking that thing that we are lacking the will, the element of the man and the women that wants to use the technology in the way that will bring our development fast. Yeah.
Or if those
So
things happen, then
mhm.
we'll actually get to the promised land faster. If technology comes in, I'm saying, okay, yes, the will would help the technology coming. But if the technology is there, that means we have accountability, and it means we'll actually get to that promised land faster, it seems then. It's just,
Yeah,
it's the
yes,
people are not accepting it.
it seems that people are not accepting, and also the leadership there to use technology to push us fast. We have a case in Tanzania where we had a president who came. This will be our fifth president, because we had Nyerere, the first one, and then we had a Mwinyi, we had a Mwinyi, we had Mkapa, we had Kikwete, and then we had Magufuli. So Magufuli was the fifth president of Tanzania. He ruled the country for only 5 years. But he was ruling Tanzania in the era of technology, in the era of where things can easily be gotten and moved around. So the second president, Mwinyi, who was the president of Tanzania between 1985 and 1995 for 10 years. He said, this guy, in 5 years as a president, he has been able to do what like the four of us as president of the country were able to do in 40 or 50 years. But he has been able to do what in 5 years, he has been to do what all of us four presidents were not able to do in 50 years of our time in government. So and definitely in praise of Magufuli, in fairness to Magufuli, he had the will, he had the political will, he had the passion to move the development of the country as fast as possible. And he whatever he could do as fast as possible, he did. And with technology, with the engineers within the country in Tanzania available, he was able to do what he was able to do in 5 years. Yeah, so it's really possible. This dynamic are really possible. Building infrastructure, building development are really possible in this era, if there is political will and leadership to do that. We don't have many excuses, Maverick.
We're hoping so. Okay, so we do have one tradition where our guests tell us what they imagine for the continent of Africa. So basically, in your vision of future Africa, what do you imagine for Africa?
I'm seeing this common market coming together and really, being a dynamic that is really pushing African development forward. The entrepreneurs, big and small, especially small ones. I know they are itching everywhere, doing things there for creating and innovating. So all that, all those forces will come together, and I see Africa, despite the weaknesses in governance, I see Africa moving really fast, and taking its place for its for the benefit of its own people, and also for the benefit of the globe as well.
Speaking about the young Africans, whether it's in academia, entrepreneurship, or public service, what would you advise them? This we have people like you mentioned, they are eager to contribute to the thriving and just Africa. So what would you advise, what do you advise them to be able to offer?
As generation of Africans, we all have to write our history and our story of Africa, the story of our contribution to Africa. Those that came before us in Africa, the might kingdoms, the might kings, the might warriors, they wrote their story for Africa and the contribution. Then came those who fought for independence. They were young men like you and me in outside Africa. They mobilized themselves and others back at home. Some of them went back and they fought for independence of Africa. They wrote the story and the contribution of Africa. Now we, against all odds, everybody did all these things against all odds. And now, young people, is your time. You have to write the story of Africa. You have to make your impact. You have to make your contribution to Africa against all odds. And in fairness to you, there is not so many odds, especially maybe except the discouragement that, oh, why should I do this? Why everybody's corrupt? Everybody's stealing the money in Africa. So that is the excuse you might have, but that is small. There is a plenty of opportunity for you to develop Africa and overcome that, pass that, and do your thing, contribute to your thing, contribute to your story, your innovation and the impact to the continent of Africa.
Wow. Doctor, thank you so much for such an inspiring and insightful conversation. It's been such a privilege to hear your perspective on these very important topics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maverick. Thank you for having me up in this podcast, and really looking forward to further engagement with yourself and the other young people here in Ireland, but also outside Ireland, and also back at home in Africa. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. And for our listeners, I hope this episode has given you, a deeper appreciation for the strengths and challenges that are unique to Africa. So, Doctor, as we wrap up, if you have any final message, I know you just gave a very powerful one, but if you have any final message or piece of advice you want to share to, these passionate people once more, the floor is yours, sir.
Yes. I would say, we keep doing our contribution. As I said, the main thing that really discourages us is looking around and seeing and hearing stories of corruption or maladministration here and there, sometimes even civil war erupting here and there. But let this not discourage us. Despite them, let us, focus on making our contribution, on making our mark for the contribution for Africa, but also for the whole of humanity. If we save Africa, we are also saving the whole of our humanity, because we are connected.
Yes, very true. Thank you. Thank you. That wraps it up today. Thank you, guys. Bye.